What is up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. We are in the offseason, Coach. What's up?
What's up, Jeff? Did you have a good Valentine's Day with the family?
Yeah, we don't do much. I've never been a Valentine's Day guy. Thank God my wife isn't a Valentine's Day gal. What about you? How was your Valentine's Day?
Oh man, we had a nice little getaway, a little overnight trip, the wife and I. So I'm just more of a romantic than you, Jeff. What can I say?
That's probably true. All right, but you're not here to talk about our Valentine's Day weekend. You want to hear about the National Football League. And yes, there's still topics to discuss, even as we get closer to the scouting combine at the end of the month, the start of the new league year in March. Let's start off with some veterans who could be cut or traded this offseason. This is a long list, could be, and some high profile names, depending on the situation, the position. Well, who are some of those players, Coach, that you were like, hey, keep an eye on this guy. I have a good feeling he might get cut.
So we already saw on Monday the Dolphins make a series of moves. Tyreek Hill, James Daniels, Bradley Chubb, all those guys, they released them. I don't know. You probably know better than me. I mean, what's Kirk Cousins' status? It looks like he's going to get – I know they reworked his contract, but it looks like he's going to get released if they can't move him.
Yeah.
I don't know about we're going to see a slew of releases, obviously. The Steelers could make some big name moves if they let Jalen Ramsey go, even bigger if they let Patrick Queen go for cost-cutting purposes. The trade market, though, I think will be the really interesting thing to watch, right? Are we going to see all-pro type names get moved? Max Crosby, that's been a conversation for a while now with the Raiders. A.J. Brown, Philadelphia. Is A.J. Brown, has he reached the point where they just can't make it work? Could you trade those two for each other? That would actually be a really smart move because the Eagles need edge rushers. The Raiders obviously need talent at the skill position to pair with Mendoza and some of the other guys that they have. I mean, that's a trade salary cap wise that lines up fairly well. So that's a trade that would actually make sense. But I think teams are going to look at what Seattle did, what the Rams did with the Stafford trade a few years back, and say to themselves, what the Patriots did by remaking their entire roster, and say, let's be aggressive this offseason.
Yeah, you can be aggressive, but I think there's also an amount of patience in NFL front offices that I think needs to be warranted. So let's talk about two quarterbacks who are not expected to be retained by their current team. They're looking to trade them, but are teams willing to even trade him? So Kyler Murray in Arizona is one, and obviously Tua down in South Beach in Miami. And Miami, like you said, has already started their purge of their roster as they change over to a new regime. If you're a team that is looking for a potential quarterback, unless you feel like there are several suitors for a Tua or a Kyler Murray, you're like, look, you all can take and eat this contract. Why do we have to trade you for a guy like Tua, who we have serious questions about his health, about his processing, about his overall ability to play the position at the highest level? Kyler Murray is often injured. He is smaller. We all know his size, all that stuff. Why would we trade and give up significant capital, whether it's financial or draft capital, doesn't matter, if we think that eventually you're going to cut him and release him to save yourself cap space, and then we can get him on the cheap, a la the Steelers with Russell Wilson and even with Aaron Rodgers last season? I don't know if there's going to be a team that is going to pony up what these teams want for those quarterbacks. What's your take on those two players in particular?
I think Kyler Murray's got a better chance of being traded than Tua, because I don't think there's any way Tua quarterbacks the Dolphins next year. I would not be surprised to see the Dolphins go into a low-key tank. You think back to Brian Flores, part of his lawsuit against the NFL. Part of that is because he claims that he was essentially approached by ownership and they wanted them to tank games so that they could improve their draft stock. And with Miami needing a quarterback and Arch Manning sitting there as the prize of a deep quarterback class a year from now, I would not at all be shocked to see the Dolphins, who have already, again, begun to purge the roster, say, hey, Quinn Ewers, man, let's go. You're going to be our quarterback. And if we go 3-14, fine, we'll take Arch Manning. And I think that devalues Tua and makes it more likely that he'll be released. Murray, maybe there are teams like the Jets who would be willing to trade for him because he does some things similar to what Justin Fields did. And if Fields stays as a backup there, they would have a complementary quarterback room. But you're right. The market for those guys, I mean, are you going to, and they're both signed through 2028 on contracts that they still have over $100 million due on. So
brutal contracts, brutal.
Yes. Yep.
So what team is going to want to take that on? That's why if a team, let's say the Steelers, who might feel that they need a quarterback upgrade, and they're like, well, we're not trading you. We're just going to wait unless you want to eat all that salary, in which case, by all means, go ahead and do it. It's kind of, this is the stage where it's like, who's going to flinch first? And it's going to be very fascinating as free agency approaches. But I want to talk to you about a player that obviously made a lot of noise last week. He went on his brother's podcast talking about Derek Carr. Derek Carr, who did not play in 2025, he was hurt in 2024, says, I would come back and play if I'm healthy enough to play and if it's the right team with the chance to win a championship. He's 34 years old, but the Saints have contractual control over him. Therefore, it would have to be a trade. What did you think, and what do you think about Derek Carr potentially coming back into the league in 2026?
I think Derek Carr looked at Phillip Rivers and he said to himself, well, damn, man, I'm 10 years younger than that dude. And, I've only been out of the league for a year. And Phillip Rivers played some decent football. Of course, Derek Carr would want to come back and play for a contender. I mean, he played for some crappy teams for most of his career. But the problem is most teams that are legitimate contenders have their quarterback. It's pretty hard to be a contender and not. Maybe he'd be willing to come back for a contender adjacent team like the Steelers if they were interested.
The Vikings are the other odds-on favorite. The Minnesota Vikings are another one.
I think the Vikings would be a better fit. I don't think he's a West Coast quarterback kind of guy. He's always been a little bit more of a vertical field stretcher, and Minnesota's got the weapons to do that. So that wouldn't shock me. Yeah.
It's just interesting because you don't even think about that. And then that would have to be a trade. Someone would have to give up draft compensation, and the Saints are like, hey, we're just going to hold on to his rights. We're not going to cut ties with him or release him. We have those rights. Therefore, we would get something for him. It'll be interesting to see. Any other names, Coach, that you think could be released or traded?
Well, all right. Let's think it way outside the box right now.
Absolutely. Okay? Let's do it.
Because and let's be honest, if you're management and you're looking at your team and you're not thinking outside the box or assessing all possibilities, you're not doing your job.
Right.
Would the Philadelphia Eagles, if they got an attractive enough offer, be willing to part ways with Jalen Hurts? There are rumblings that, I live near the Philadelphia area. I read all the Philly stuff and listen to the commentary, et cetera. It's not kumbaya between Jalen Hurts and that franchise. They've had their ups and downs. Hurts has some issues with his teammates in the locker room. They worry about his scheme fit. Now they brought in a new OC in Sean Mannion. Maybe he can get Hurts right, but he's had 5 different OCs in the last 5 seasons there. And, there's a little bit of thinking in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts is a little bit lost right now. And maybe they don't want to move AJ Brown. Maybe they think, no, we like our wide receivers. We think the quarterback might be the issue. Now they have Tanner McKee as a backup who they like, but who did Sean Mannion just do a great job of coaching in Green Bay this past year? Malik Willis, who is the biggest free agent quarterback on the upcoming market. If a team blew Philly away and was like, hey, man, we're going to give you a first and we're going to give you a stud player, like we said, the Eagles need an edge rusher. Would they bite? I think it's highly unlikely, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility.
If there was a team that would be, in my opinion, that would entertain that deal, it would be Philadelphia. And Philadelphia's proven to make the big move. We all remember the draft day trade with the Tennessee Titans to acquire A.J. Brown. They're willing to move some pieces to better their team. I don't think it's Jalen Hurts, though. Do you?
I don't think so. But at the same time, I also think that there's been enough issues with Jalen Hurts for them to say, boy, do we think that we can get better in the locker room and on the field by doing this? Yeah. I think that they would have an internal conversation about it.
It's going to be interesting if that name is on the trade block. Like it would be crazy to see who would be interested. What would they give up? Would other players be involved? That would be the definition of a blockbuster trade for a Super Bowl MVP just 2 years ago. All right, let's go to our next topic. What team, if you could pinpoint one, could be next year's Jacksonville Jaguars or New England Patriots? We're talking about teams that are coming off really bad seasons, but turn the corner, whether it's good free agency, good draft, combination of both, and then find themselves in the postseason. Coach, are there any teams that come to mind when you think about this question?
A lot of people talking about the Giants because they have some talented pieces on the roster, and now you're going to get John Harbaugh, who comes in with a proven history of creating winning cultures and tough football teams, and he's got the opportunity there to harness Jackson Dart and some of their weapons on offense, and they've got some dudes on the defensive front, etc. So, I mean, that's a possibility, but I don't know, man. There's a part of me that thinks the more that I look at it, that Todd Monken could do a sneaky good job with the Browns. And I know they're the Browns. I know they have a quarterback issue, but at the same time, they've got the 30th easiest schedule, or hardest schedule, I should say, the third easiest schedule in the NFL for next year. They could not have screwed up the quarterback situation any worse than they did last year. They dealt Kevin Stefanski a losing hand, and Monken is a guy who I think, because of his connection to college football, is really good dealing with the younger quarterbacks. And I don't know what they're going to do at the quarterback position in Cleveland. I don't know if they're, where they're going to go. But if they could just get competent quarterback play with that defense, I'm not saying the Browns could go 12-5 or anything like that. But rebounding to become a 500 team, or even maybe a 9-8 team, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility.
All right, so do you have a criteria for this in terms of record last season and then making the playoffs this upcoming season? What is your criteria? Is it 3 wins, 4 wins, 6 wins, whatever?
I think if you improve yourself by 3 or 4 wins, that's a significant jump in the NFL.
Well, the Chiefs is low-hanging fruit. They were 6-11.
Yes, for sure. They're kind of an outlier.
Okay, no, that's fine. So I would actually stay in the AFC North, but I think Cincinnati. Because if Joe Burrow stays healthy and then they finish 6-11, I think they're going to be in the contention for a playoff spot, for a division crown, and that offense is good enough. The question always is the same. Can they protect Joe Burrow, and can they actually field a competent defense? And they have yet to show us that, but that's who I would go with. Other than that, I don't see the Dolphins in the AFC. Like you mentioned earlier, they kind of are already starting the dumpster fire sale. The Jets are the Jets. I don't believe in the Browns and Monken, especially without Jim Schwartz on the defensive side. Tennessee's going to take a couple years to rebuild. The Raiders, although I think they're going to be vastly improved, I don't think if you're leaning on Mendoza to be that guy from day one, there's going to be growing pains.
Yep.
That kind of limits your options, right? So I'm going to go with, you went with the Browns, I'm going to go with the Bengals. Let's go to the NFC. Are there any teams in the National Football Conference that you like in this regard? You said the Giants. Is there anyone else?
The Giants. The Commanders are a bit of an outlier too, because they had the run to the NFC Championship, and then this year, with all the injuries and Jaden Daniels being hurt, they could quickly bounce back. But I don't think that. I think that's them coming back to the form of 2 years ago, as opposed to really turning things around. The Giants would be the team that I would look for there. I think the rest of the NFC, I don't want to say it's set, but I don't see the Cardinals turning it around. Maybe the Saints. Tyler Shuck played good football down the stretch, and that's a weak division, so they're a possibility.
What are your thoughts on the Cowboys? They're 7-9-1. I know that we're talking 3 games, but could they somehow, some way find a way with Dak Prescott and maybe improving their defense to what they do with George Pickens? Who knows? There's rumors they're going to franchise tag him. What's your take on the Cowboys potentially turning it around?
I as long as Jerry Jones is in his current role, I have zero faith in the Cowboys. I feel like he will find a way to insert himself to their own detriment.
I thought you were going to say as long as Jerry Jones has a pulse.
You could probably substitute that phrase.
Okay. All right. So there you go. There's the NFC. I mean, you're talking about the majority of the teams were 8-9 or better. I mean, there weren't a lot of losing teams. So, okay, that's a good exercise there. We'll keep tabs on that. Let's go to the third topic. We're redrafting the 2025 quarterback class after their first season in the NFL. Here's the order in which they were taken last year. First round picks, Cam Ward went to Tennessee. Jackson Dart goes to the New York Giants. Then you had a second round pick. Tyler Shuck goes to New Orleans. Jalen Milroe went to Seattle in the third round. Dylan Gabriel, I believe, was a fourth round selection by the Cleveland Browns. And then Sanders, was he fifth or sixth? I can't remember.
He was a fifth round, late fifth round.
So fifth rounder, both of those go to Cleveland. If you were to do it over again, what would you change, if anything? You could say, no, I think this is the way it should be.
I think it's pretty close. I'd be interested to know if Tennessee would take Jackson Dart over Cam Ward, given what they saw out of Jackson Dart this past year. He certainly played some dynamic football when he was in the lineup. Not that Cam Ward played poorly. He didn't. He was up against it again on a Tennessee team with a poor line and one of the worst skill position groups in football. So put Jackson Dart in Tennessee. Is he going to be any better than how Cam Ward played? Probably not. But it would be interesting to know if their evaluation would change given what they know now. Tyler Shuck is another one who, again, man, played really good football down the stretch. But when I look at those three guys, he's still probably number three. The separation there is huge. I mean, Ward, Dart, and Shuck could all wind up being quality NFL starters. The sample size we saw from Gabriel and Sanders does not suggest either one will ever be a consistent NFL starter. And Milroe, I mean, he's riding around with a Super Bowl ring, congratulations, man. But he didn't have to really do anything. So we just don't know. He's still an unknown quantity.
Well, and Milroe is in that he's not going to get an opportunity for the next 4 years unless Sam Darnold gets hurt, in which case he's just basically holding a clipboard and biding his time. I agree with you, though. I don't think Jackson Dart in Tennessee would have been any better. I think he probably would have been more injured because I think the injuries he sustained in the New York Giants system were his own doing in terms of not being able to slide or willing to slide. But Cam Ward, I don't know. Like, this wasn't that great of a draft class. We knew that going into it. I didn't see maybe if there was like one or two highlights or plays where I was like, look at Cam Ward. Like, that's a great play. You saw that from Jackson Dart. You saw him make some plays on big stages. In terms of Tyler Shuck, I agree with you. Second round pick was where he should be. Dylan Gabriel was a shock when he got drafted. I still am shocked he went in the fourth round and they went before Shedeur Sanders. I saw Shedeur Sanders play a good bit. I wasn't impressed with his play, even when he was winning games. I wouldn't change anything. And I know that's a boring answer, but I think that in this instance, they got it right. You think so too?
Yeah. I think that, again, we could flip-flop one at the top, maybe, but otherwise, this is pretty much chalk.
Okay. Next topic is a bold prediction for the 2026 NFL quarterback market. Let's do a clarifying question here. Are you talking about the draft or free agency or both?
Talking about established quarterbacks, guys in the league.
Yep. Okay. All right. So what do you think? What do you got?
Well, we mentioned Hurts. I mean, again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't throw any of these names out here unless I thought like maybe there's just a possibility, right? We're not throwing Josh Allen's name out. Josh Allen's not being traded. No. However, all right, let me throw this out here and you just give me your gut reaction. Do you think the Ravens would consider moving on from Lamar Jackson?
Yes, I do. I honest to God do. We'll know soon enough, though. He's due for, I think, a $70 million cap hit this year. It's some absurd number. Yep. There's no way they're going to pay him that. But they have to, if they're going to trade him, that would have to be before the draft. So there's almost like a deadline of, okay, we can't, let's say they wanted to trade him to Vegas. That's been the rumor, right? That maybe Tom Brady and the Raiders would want to bring Lamar out to Vegas. They would have to make that move before the draft because the Ravens would want the first overall pick for Lamar Jackson. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I think he stays in Baltimore.
Me too. But if we read about it happening, I wouldn't be shocked. I would be like, whoa, but I wouldn't be scratching my head about it. I wouldn't be going, what the hell? Like there are moves that could be made that would leave us just baffled. Yeah. This would not be one of them. I mean, we have seen it year after year now in Baltimore where Jackson either is injured and unavailable or not playing his best football when the playoffs roll around, or simply just doesn't get it done in the playoffs. Right? If you're Jesse Minter and you come in and you're now coming from a franchise that has its own history of postseason struggles, do you say to yourself, I don't want to marry myself to a guy I don't believe in the postseason, and I don't like the injury history and all that other stuff. And if there's an offer on the table that would get us the opportunity to take Mendoza or to get another elite quarterback, I'll take a shot at it.
That would be bold. I'm trying to think of another bold, but you brought up the Hurts trade would be huge. Man,
right, this is not going to happen. Not 100% not going to happen.
Hit me with it.
But think back to 2018. Jared Goff, number 1 overall pick in the draft of the Rams, quarterbacks the Rams to the Super Bowl against New England. The Patriots just obliterate him in the Super Bowl. They win 13-3. The Rams offense is completely inept. And Sean McVay says to himself, I've got this young quarterback on my hands here, but I think he just got exposed. And I don't think I can run my offense to its potential with this guy. And they make the bold move. They send him to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. What if the Patriots thought similarly about Drake May? Drake May just got completely exposed by Seattle. And the more you watch of that, the worse it looks. His body language on the sidelines is bad. Mike Vrabel is spending half the damn Super Bowl being Drake May's personal cheerleader, talking about his body language and, put it behind you and get that look off your face. And the stuff I say to high school kids. And now you're saying it to your franchise quarterback in the Super Bowl. What if, and again, this is really not going to happen, but what if New England was like, we think, we could move him for another elite quarterback who might be better suited for what we want to do?
Let me ask you this. How many, I don't know if did you ever watch wrestling maybe back in the
WWE?
WWF.
Jimmy Superfly Snuka. That was my guy, Jeff.
Do you remember the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase?
Of course.
He created his own damn belt. All right. He has his own belt and his famous
with the dollar signs.
Yes. And his favorite slogan was everybody's got a price. And how many quarterbacks do you think that are currently on a roster, they would say, we don't have a price?
Right.
We're not trading this person if you offered us the world. Like I would think Josh Allen is that guy.
Agreed.
You're not trading Josh Allen. You're not trading Jaden Daniels because of the potential that he's shown when he's healthy. How many of those quarterbacks that are currently starters do you think that an NFL team, like you mentioned Jalen Hurts, that was intriguing because I never thought about that. Is Howie Roseman saying, hey, Ted DiBiase, I got a price. Well, what is the price? How much are you willing to give up? How many first-round picks? How many players are you going to give me? Do you think, how many untouchables are there, in your opinion?
That's a good question. Let's bookmark that and come back to that on next week. That's a great topic for next week. That's a good one.
How many untouchables quarterbacks are there? We'll do that next week. But I think that's like a segue from this the bold prediction for the quarterback market is how many teams will say, you can't offer me enough for this guy. So we'll talk about that next week. All right, let's go to our fifth topic. Joey Porter. Yes, senior, not his son, who's the cornerback of the Steelers, number 24, is coming off a great year. Joey Porter Sr. went on Cam Hayward's podcast during Radio Row, and boy, he sounded off on some former players, legends of the Pittsburgh Steelers, mainly Ben Roethlisberger, but also James Harrison. What did you think about that, Coach? Was it cheap or was it warranted?
It feels so after the fact to me. He's digging up stuff that's 20 years old now.
Oh, yeah.
And talking about, how Ben Roethlisberger was a bad teammate. And if you go talk to the guys who played with him then, and they'll all agree. And actually, some of those guys did chime in and say, they're basically like, preach, Joey. Yeah. But I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, having been somebody who covered him for a long time, feels like a person in two parts. Pre-Milledgeville, which is when Ben Roethlisberger was accused of sexually assaulting a woman. He's actually accused twice. And then post that event where beforehand, by just about every account of almost everybody who's covered him, he was a jerk. He didn't treat people well, whether they were teammates or journalists or women or whatever. And then post that event where, was that an act, what we saw after that event, or was that a real transformation in Ben Roethlisberger? I get the guys who experienced maybe one part of that and not the other. I don't think it's a complete story, but I also don't think it's a false story.
Yeah. When I heard it, everyone was wanting to take a side. Joey Porter was right. Ben was a jerk. Or no, Ben was great and he was a good teammate. And I said, can't both of these things be true? And I think that the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Joey Porter was there in the formative years of Ben Roethlisberger's career where he was a jerk. He had the entire city on a platter at age 22 years old, and he didn't have to be a leader because there was Jerome Bettis, there was Hines Ward, there was Joey Porter Sr., there was James Farrior. I could run down the list of these great Steeler leaders, and Ben just had to show up. Show up and don't screw it up is essentially how he had to handle his early career. And then after that, he had to step into an offensive leadership role. And I think even then there were some defensive players that didn't like the way he went about his business, the way that he handled things. But this was not earth-shattering stuff for me. Was it for you? Because I think as Steeler fans were like, yeah, we kind of knew this.
Yeah, no, the national media devoured it more because it might be new for some people. But yeah, this is stuff Steelers fans have been hearing and, processing for a long time.
Right. All right. So, I think both can be true. Let's finish this up with a profile. And this is kind of an interesting, I didn't even tell you about this. So this is going to be interesting. I want to talk about George Pickens. It came out on Monday morning from Todd Archer that the Cowboys had to find George Pickens multiple times last season for different things, probably for being late. We know
Shocking.
we know about when they went to Vegas, he and CeeDee Lamb missed the team bus or something along those lines. And George Pickens is unbelievably talented. Anyone that's watched him play can see the raw talent. They should be able to see also why he didn't go in the first round, but was a second-round draft pick by the Steelers out of Georgia. Now he finds himself in a position where he's looking to get paid. The Cowboys are reportedly going to franchise tag him. But, man, doesn't it feel like, and maybe this is the Cowboys doing some PR on their own of trying to say, like, hey, this maybe is why we do something. There are some athletes that can't get out of the way, can they? Am I right there?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt George Pickens is that guy. He's a buyer beware if ever there was one for the Cowboys. He had some phenomenal games. He ended up 93 catches. That's a great year. He had some phenomenal games. A lot of them came kind of in the middle of the season, and then he had a few run-ins, and the production fell off there for a little bit. Who are you going to get? Like if you're gonna embrace George Pickens, you gotta embrace all of it. You can't go in there naively and say to yourself, we'll remedy him, particularly once he gets all the money. Right? Once he gets all the money, the odds that some of those things that you don't want to have to deal with increase are pretty great. So you got to find a way of dealing with George Pickens that allows you to live with the stuff that you might not be able to live with other players. And that can be tough on a locker room. And that's why that's a challenge right there, man. The famous John Wooden quote, not everybody gets treated equally. Everybody gets treated fairly. Well, what's fair for George Pickens that doesn't alienate the rest of the locker room? That's going to be an interesting challenge.
When I think of George Pickens, I picture the example, the gold standard for why you hate wide receivers. And that is because when things are good, things are great. I'm getting the football. We're winning. I'm getting the football. I'm scoring touchdowns. I'm getting the football. You see where I'm going with this. But when things aren't going great, you're not winning football games. You're not getting the football. What do? Well, he's the poster child for, well, then that's when I pout. That's when I do the things that are going to get me fined. That's when I do those things that are going to be not desirable from a team perspective. And so, again, I think that's your poster boy, isn't it?
It sure is, man. And, I would not want to coach George Pickens. No. I wouldn't. It would be very frustrating to coach a guy who you don't know what you're going to get. Like consistency is one of the most attractive traits in a player. Reliability. I know what I'm getting. Maybe he's not the most gifted at X, Y, or Z, but I can coach around that because I know what he is going to give me. The whole notion that like George Pickens can be the best wide receiver in the NFL for a couple weeks in a row. And then I begin to put my eggs in that basket and build my offense accordingly. And then he'll, for a 2-week stretch, be like the 4th best receiver on my team. That is maddening.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens to George Pickens. Will he get franchise tagged by the Cowboys? Will they try and give him a long-term deal? I feel like they're playing with fire there, but hey, it's the Cowboys and you never know what they're going to do. And we'll keep tabs on that as we progress on through the rest of the offseason. But Coach, obviously you're going to be gearing up to head down to Indiana or to Indianapolis to, I guess it's over for you. It's not down, to be geographically correct. You're going to the Combine, yes?
I am. Everything's west to me, Jeff. I'm
literally,
I can go about 100 yards to the east before I hit an ocean. And that's about it. So
that is true. What else you got coming up? I do want you to plug your Friday show, which was phenomenal on your Call Sheet podcast.
That was great, man. Doug Farrar was excellent, acclaimed journalist, currently writes for Athlon Sports, has written for everybody relevant in the sporting world over the last 20 years, Sports Illustrated, ESPN, Washington Post, Yahoo, etc. He was the guest, and on Friday we talked about football innovation. Some of today's conversation really related to some things that Doug and I talked about, when your back's against the wall, you have to innovate, and teams or individuals who have done it well. He's just really interesting. He's got a ton of football experience. So yeah, if you get an opportunity, go back, listen to Friday's Call Sheet. It dropped a little bit later in the day. Some people may have missed it.
Yeah, go check that out wherever you get your podcast. Check out his work at steelcurtainnetwork.com, as well as the Steel Curtain Network for our Steelers coverage. But Coach, as always, thanks for your time, man. We'll talk next week. Take it easy.